A very good evening from Dubai to all our viewers across the world. What do we say about a day like today? Monday began with it looking like all of the parties and players in this war by US and Israel on Iran were standing on the edge of a precipice. Iran and Israel had attacked each other's nuclear facilities, and Trump's 48-hour deadline for Iran to fully open the Strait of Hormuz was going to run out on Tuesday early morning here in the UAE. Iran had remained defiant and had released a list of energy and infrastructure sites it would attack across the Gulf, warning that the Gulf would go dark if Trump made an attempt to attack Iran's power and energy sites. I was at UAE's oldest mosque in Fujairah. It's called the Al-Bidya Mosque. The rain was pouring down when the first ray of sunshine metaphorically emerged. Trump suddenly announced that talks with Iran were going really well and that he had instructed his Department of War to halt all attacks on Iran's energy and power infra, and things were going to be now tested for 5 days. However, here's the catch. Iranian media is reporting that there is no such confirmation of any talks between anybody in Iran and the Trump administration. So at this point, what we see is a unilateral sort of announcement by Trump. Iranians are saying he did it to calm the markets. It's all about bringing the price of oil down, and it doesn't change anything. So does it change something or does it not change something? We'll find out from a panel of experts. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. For the last week, we have been traveling through the UAE from different parts, from different emirates. We were earlier in Fujairah today. Fujairah is an area that the UAE has tried to develop as an alternative to the Strait of Hormuz. And then we were at Al-Bidya, the oldest mosque that dates back to 1599 in the UAE. We've also been near the Hormuz front line, 70 nautical miles away from the strait that has become the nerve center of this war. And just as we were reporting on the cascading escalation of this war, came Trump's post on Truth Social, basically announcing that he was halting attacks on power and energy in Iran for 5 days. We thought this was a great moment of possible de-escalation, but there has been confusion since, with Iranian media saying there is no information of any talks, and American media reporting that the countries that have been mediating are Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkey. So what happens next? Let's introduce our panel of experts today as we try and make sense of it all. Military veteran General Shukla is with us from Delhi. Aaron Miller is with us, Aaron David Miller. He's a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment. He joins us from the United States today. Thank you, Aaron. Helit Barrel joins us from Israel. She's been a senior national security personnel in Israel. Thank you. And veteran diplomat Ambassador Yash Sinha, who has actually led the Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan desk in India, been to Iran a number of times, even met with the now slain Ayatollah Khamenei twice, is with us as well. Very quickly, before I open this up for comments, let me play out at least one of Trump's many absolutely confusing statements, making this announcement and elaborating on it. Take a look.
To get together today by probably phone, because it's very hard to find a country. It's very hard for them to get out, I guess. But we'll at some point very, very soon meet. We're doing a 5-day period. We'll see how that goes. And if it goes well, we're going to end up with settling this. Otherwise, we'll just keep bombing our little hearts out.
Who is Steve Witkoff speaking with?
So we'll go for settling this, or we'll keep bombing our little hearts out. I mean, not exactly the language you'd expect to use when you were close to serious negotiations. Aaron, I'll start with you. Are you able to make sense of it all? What is actually going on here? Some Iranians I've been interviewing say this is all to calm the markets. It's all about bringing the price of oil down. The market did reflect that sentiment. Is this serious? Is this Trump looking for an off-ramp? Is there actual mediation going on? What do you make of it, Aaron?
Look, I think that the immediate objective was to back away from a very dangerous and unrealistic ultimatum. I think Trump was under enormous pressure from the Gulf states. The Iranians did not back down. The risk of attacking infrastructure would have basically resulted in an Iranian response that we haven't seen so far, more widespread attacks on infrastructure. And I think what we have here is the reality that the Iranians are deploying geography And geography can be a very dangerous weapon because proximity means vulnerability. And right now, the Iranians have an upper hand. As far as any deal is concerned, I spent most of my professional life in negotiations. If you want a serious negotiation and agreement, you need three things. You need two parties who are willing and able. You do not have that. You need a shared sense of urgency, that is to say, enough pain to push parties to the negotiation and enough prospects of gain to actually consummate. You don't have that. And number three, the key is, what is the basis that ultimately would allow this crisis to be resolved? I see absolutely no balance of interest that can be struck right now between Washington and Tehran. As far as the Israelis are concerned, when Donald Trump believes it's time to stop the war, given Netanyahu's dependence on him, the Israelis will stop. But we're a long way away from that.
So can I ask you, before I move on to Helet from Israel, you basically think that Trump has created time for himself so he doesn't have to act on his own ultimatum, which was going to expire on Tuesday early morning here in the UAE?
Yes, I think that was the precipitating factor. Does this constitute an off-ramp, or is it designed to buy time? I mean, we could keep this up for the next 4 or 5 or 6 weeks, but the reality is the issue here is reopening the straits. That's what's turned this conflict from a trilateral conflict, Israel, Iran, and the U.S., into a global crisis. And Trump understands that. So I would like to hope that these contacts done indirectly through Arab mediators could be the first indication of a negotiation. But frankly, with the Iranians, they have two speeds, slow and slower.
Okay, let's bring in Helet Barrel from Israel. Helet, you've been arguing on our program for the last many days that when Trump wants to end this, he will, something that Aaron agrees with. But he doesn't see this as an end. He doesn't even see this as a de-escalation. He simply sees this as Trump maneuvering himself some time and maybe also calming the markets down in the meantime. Do you see it differently?
The answer is I don't know, and I have no way of knowing. It's Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, as Donald Trump says, many, many things, often contradictory to one another. And so I have no bet in this, whether this is serious or not. I will say that what we are hearing through our channels here in Israel is that there are details to a plan and a negotiation format that have been going back and forth. It seems in some of his tweets or expressions of what is going on that Donald Trump has put out, some of the things are pretty detailed. For example, saying, oh, we've agreed on 15 points. Not that I'm taking him at that word, but some of these things could be indicative this has actually happened. And to me, the greatest indication is if this meeting that is planned to take place in Islamabad in a few days happens or doesn't happen. If it does, I think it is an indication that it is an off-ramp, the beginning of an off-ramp. If it doesn't, we're back where we were before, and we can say, okay, this is all toying with oil prices. I'm not particularly impressed with the Iranians' denials of negotiations. That's kind of run-of-the-mill. I think it's interesting that the two names that are coming back up and again are, on the one hand, Kalibaf, who's the head of the Majlis, and on the other hand, Abbas Araghchi as the two addresses in Iran, because those are interesting. They're very different strands of, I wouldn't say leadership, but shall we say potential leadership. So I'm at the point where I'm saying we'll have to wait and see. I'm not willing to say this is nothing, but I'm certainly up in the air whether this is something. I think it's going to come to test very quickly, obviously, and certainly tying himself into the ultimatum hasn't helped President Trump.
Ambassador Sinha, how do you read it? The fact is these reports that Turkey, Pakistan, and Egypt are the mediators, and Helet is saying, if there's an actual meeting in Islamabad, that's the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Aaron is much more skeptical. He's like, Trump is only buying a little bit of time, so he doesn't have to demonstrate something that deepens him in the escalation trap further on Tuesday morning. How do you see it, Ambassador Yash?
Barkha, frankly, I don't know what to make of this because I'm not sure whether it is taco or whether this is something really serious, and only time will tell. because you've had so many contradictory statements. I mean, look at the sanctions. I mean, at one time India was sanctioned for buying Russian oil. Now there are exemptions provided to India. Iran oil was sanctioned. Now they're saying that you can buy Iranian oil. So frankly, this administration's policy makes no sense to me. And if the only silver lining is that if there is an element of truth in what President Trump is saying, and that fighting stops, or at least there is a ceasefire, and then perhaps an agreement, that would be the best outcome from what's happening. But I'm not sure, because everyone's very skeptical, because we've been there before. We've seen contradictory statements coming out of the White House. So we'll have to wait and see whether mediation efforts lead to this. The fact is clear that the rise in oil prices were affecting everyone, and including the people in the US and President Trump. So I think there is some truth in the fact that rising gasoline prices would result in a change of course, or at least a rethink on the part of the administration. But we'll have to wait and see, because if Iran says that there have been no negotiations, I agree with her. I wouldn't take them at their word. But the fact is, if fighting stops for the next few days, that is a good thing. And if fighting stops, then there may be some merit in the fact that there is something going on behind closed doors. And if the fighting actually comes to a stop and there's an agreement, that would be great, not only for the combatants, but for the rest of the world.
Let me bring in General Shukla. General Shukla, you have been saying, as a military man, let better sense prevail. Has better sense prevailed, or is this Trump being, somebody called it Trump's decoy? If it was a decoy, the Iranians certainly haven't bought into it. I just interviewed a professor at Tehran University, and she said, we were bombed in the middle of negotiations. Why would we trust Trump with this statement? And who's going to trust him in Iran if he's going to say in 5 days we'll bomb our little hearts out? I mean, his language is anything but off-rampy.
Actually, a reality. I mean, the Iranians who are negotiating now, what is the guarantee that they won't be bombed? So it is a little strange. But let me make 2 points. It is my, what shall I say, estimation that the depth of the Iranian resilience caused Trump to revisit some of his bluster. This business of attacking power installations and the response that would have got was almost equivalent to a mad, mutually assured destruction kind of stuff in the conventional domain. Mm-hmm. And I think the American military, which I think is pretty professional, would be driving home some of these realities to Trump. So just, 2-3 issues. While the Americans are in complete control of the skies, the strait is under Iranian control. We've been hearing for quite a while now about how the drones strikes have declined 90%, the missile strikes have declined 85%, so on and so forth. But the missiles continue to keep coming. In fact, over the last 2 days, if I'm not wrong, many of them have caused severe destruction in Israel. So some of these issues would certainly be bothering Trump. And this Mr. Hexet's repeated assertions that just one more bold attack and it will alter the conflict fundamentally, we've seen quite a few of them now. And I think the second point is that deep down, somebody has told Trump, possibly Susie Wiles, I'm told he listens to her a lot, that there are limitations to American military power. While it can do a lot of good stuff, at these distant strikes, I don't think, what were the options? There were a couple of bad options. Kharj Island doesn't seem to be a very good option militarily. Occupying the southern coastline is going to be hugely consuming in troops. And even this tanker escort business, given all the missiles, drones, and so on and so forth, there didn't seem to be any good military options. That would be the military advice to Trump. So on balance, I think he has taken a 5-day breather. And the last point that I would like to make it, what are the terms of negotiations? When the conflict started, I was told that the Iranians had already agreed to some kind of, down blending of the enriched uranium. They had almost promised to get the nuclear stockpiles down to a very low limit. Now, what more thing can they give? Some of the demands from the Israelis that I have heard, that roll back the missile program and all. I mean, which sane country will agree to them? So the terms of negotiations seem to me very strange. So I suspect, and this is just a hunch, that Trump realizes the limits of American military power. In these 5 days, he's going to look for some off-ramp, and whatever off-ramp he gets, if he can spin it off, he will just take it. So I'm a bit of an optimist. I think something is going to happen in these next 5 days, not because of any other reason, but I think he realizes that his military has reached a dead end.
So let me bring in Aaron Miller here. Aaron, I know you have to hop off, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. You said he's buying time. All right. What happens after he buys time? What happens after he gives himself? What happens in these next 5 days? Particularly if Iran continues to say, hey, you're the one who backed down. We're not opening Strait of Hormuz. Or if the Israelis, there was, Israeli Air Force action today, if that continues and at one level, the sort of military exchange of fire and bombings continues. I can't hear Aaron. Could we unmute him, please? Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. Go ahead.
Look, again, next week will be we'll have been in this conflict for a month. And after a month, it seems to me that the administration may well have begun to understand the limitations of the escalation dominance that they claim to have achieved. I said to you before that geography is destiny. It is destiny. And the Iranians pursuing this horizontal escalation policy have managed to find two critically important weak points for which the administration cannot defend. One is the Straits, who gets through and who doesn't. Iranian oil gets through, Chinese oil gets through, Indian oil may get through, but no one else's oil. And the second is they fundamentally changed the security and stability of the future of Gulf states. They have tremendous leverage right now. The key question, and I think the general's point is right, I think Trump is in fact looking for an off-ramp. I don't think there is a constituency in this country that he cares about that would do anything other than breathe a tremendous collective sigh of relief if tomorrow Trump said we won and withdrew. The problem is not on Trump's side, and frankly, it's not on Netanyahu's side, because when Donald Trump says jump, Netanyahu is going to say, because for Netanyahu, the most important development in 2026 is not Iran, it's not Lebanon, it's not Gaza, it's getting reelected. And he needs Donald Trump's support for that. The problem lies in Iran and its conception and image of victory. What do they need to stand down? I don't have an answer to that question. They say reparations. They say guarantees against future attacks. And the Russians and the Chinese, they'll bring them in order to mount pressure on the Americans. And they may even want sanctions relief. So again, I don't think 5 days is the right metric. It was a convenient timeline for Trump because he created a dangerous and reckless ultimatum. Again, I think we're, as the Brits would say, a long way from Tipperary here, from finding a path to solve this. But what you may see in coming days is a de-escalation, a change from the kinetic activity that the Americans have been pursuing to provide time and space, perhaps, for these contacts to bear fruit.
And very quickly before we let you go, you're absolutely right that Iran has stated these conditions. They're obviously approaching this from a maximalist view, Aaron. Do you think the Americans would be willing to meet Iran on any of its demands?
On sanctions relief, it's head exploding. But if that's what the Iranians demanded, they need a win here. They need a win, and they need to demonstrate deterrence, that this will not happen 6 months from now. It will not happen a year from now. It will not happen two years from now. I think Donald Trump would probably gladly give that away. One last point. My colleague at Carnegie, Karuna Sajapur, said that Trump was looking for an Iranian Delcy Rodriguez. But what he's found is, according to Kareem, is an Iranian Kim Jong-un. And that gets back to the issue of what are Iran's demands to stand down. By the way, this has been a tremendous panel, great wisdom on the part of all of your guests. Happy to reappear at some time that's mutually convenient.
Thank you, Aaron, for your time, and we hope to reconnect with you later. Thank you very much. Let me bring in Helet on everything that, oops, we lost Helet there. There's Helet. Helet, I'm just going to read out some more details about that potential Islamabad meeting that you were referring to. This is actually news coming out from Israel. A senior Israeli official has been quoted saying, contacts are underway for a meeting between senior Iranian and American officials in Islamabad. And as part of the sort of build-up, the possibility is being considered that U.S. Vice President Vance will be the senior American representative. The Israeli official goes on to say Israel knew that mediation efforts by several countries were underway to initiate talks between Iran and the U.S., but was surprised by Trump's statement that these contacts are progressing and that there are apparently agreements on 15 points. Do you believe that Netanyahu and the government would have been taken by surprise?
It's 50-50 for me. I think from what I'm hearing here that over the weekend, the negotiations took a different pace and that the Israeli government was appraised of that. So I don't know to what extent, and certainly they could have been surprised, as most of us were, at midnight here in Israel to see his, US time, to see his first tweet, which was kind of like, a first signal that something was changing, and then a second tweet. So, but that's Donald Trump. That's his style of doing diplomatic and international work. So I think that may have been surprising, but not that, that was in the making in terms of surprise. I know that people are looking for this divide between Israel and the United States, but I truly think they're very much in lockstep on this particular war. Not to say that objectives can't vary, but as Aaron Miller mentioned, the prime minister's dependence on the president is so great that there wouldn't be any statements of that would be disconcerting or problematic from the Israeli side. I think it's important to note that in Israel, we do have more details coming out, which I don't know the accuracy of, but that are being put out, such as what are the components of this agreement. And they do include comprehensive compromises on the Iranian side and the ballistic missile issue, which, as we know, was a no-go before this war. So no idea if that's true or not, but if it is, again, that would be a great achievement, as would be, of course, the extraction of the highly enriched uranium to 60% and other issues. And I think it's important to understand that the sanction issue is key to this Iranian regime, what's left of it, because there is no way whoever is left in this regime has any ability to start addressing the core problems of the Iranian nation without that influx of funds. And so, in the sense, if you're looking at it from an Israeli perspective, which is very focused on nuclear and missile, then this could be something that will yield important achievements. But if you're looking at it from the perspective of the Iranian people who are desiring of regime change, this would not be a good deal for them if sanctions are relieved and the regime is fortified, even if it would just be for a while, because I do believe that this regime has crossed the Rubicon with its own people. But again, certainly an influx of funds, the way sanction reliefs would bring to Iran, to the Iranian regime, would certainly in the short term strengthen the regime's position vis-a-vis its people.
Okay, let me bring in Ambassador Yash Sinha and General Shukla. Ambassador Yash Sinha, how do you look at this involvement of Pakistan? I should also say Prime Minister Modi spoke in Parliament today. That was before Trump's announcement. He spoke about the gravity of the situation, how this was the country had to remain united like it did in the pandemic. And, he acknowledged from the floor of Parliament the gravitas and the gravity of the consequences if this war carries on. We're not at a point where we know whether the war is ending, but we're at a point where a process may have begun to look for an off-ramp. If Islamabad, and again, Helet is qualifying this, these are all media reports, we have no official confirmation of this. What do you make of the fact that Pakistan has chosen to get itself involved, if this is true, at the center of this? And, does it make you feel that India should have also offered to mediate, or do you feel a sigh of relief that India is no part of this mess?
Barkha, why am I not surprised that Pakistan is trying to mediate? It's always punched way above its weight. And don't forget that, President Trump considers Munir to be his favorite field marshal. So, I mean, Pakistan would certainly try and jump into the fray. And I also recall when, when Nixon was his outreach to China, and how Kissinger went quietly, surreptitiously to Pakistan and then flew to China. So there's a history. I mean, Pakistan is a client state of the United States, has been for many, many years. And Pakistan, being a neighbor of Iran, though I'm quite surprised because I recall there was a statement by Munir asking the Shias who were protesting to go and live in Iran. So, I mean, I don't know who the interlocutor from Iran will be. I presume it will be Foreign Minister Arachi, who's a very seasoned diplomat. He was a vice minister earlier when I was heading the division in Delhi. So I don't know what the outcome is going to be. I don't even know where the meeting will take place. But perhaps the US administration could send Zach Witkoff and his father along with the vice president. That might sort of sugar the deal a bit, sugarcoat the deal. So I think it is something that would be worth watching. And if Pakistan really pulls it off, I think it would be for them winning a huge number of brownie points as far as the US is concerned, and perhaps even Iran, but certainly the US.
But you did well to flag those reports of Field Marshal Asim Munir telling a Shia delegation, if you love Iran so much, go to Iran. So all kinds of strange, contradictory developments here. General Raj Shukla, we have Iranian Professor Marandi, whom we've seen across global channels, telling RT News, I assure you there are absolutely no US-Iran talks. There's no way in the world that Iranians are going to trust Trump. We are at war. Iran is prepared for a very, very long war. We have Trump by the throat. Now, again, I think, like Helit, we don't know. There's all kinds of sort of chaotic, contradictory information emerging, including now this report of Pakistan hosting possible US-Iran talks. Again, we don't even have an official response from Iran. We have nobody in Iran, other than the Iranian media, that has officially spoken about Trump's claims. How do you look at it, these developments, General Shukla?
Just let me add the speculation and the confusion. So I think what would have happened is that Trump at some stage realized that militarily he had no good options. So now he makes this overblown statement that 48 hours and if you don't open the strait, this is what I will do. Simultaneously winks at Vance, who had perhaps opened some channels with the Turks, the Egyptians, and the Pakis to say, get along and see if we can do something. And from there, perhaps he notes some progress and now makes the second announcement. I mean, the point I make is that one must not look at too much logic from Trump. Trying to find logic in what he does will just, put you in all kinds of knots. So this is, I think, the way he does stuff. But the point is that he's added 5 days to the deadline. So let's heave a sigh of relief. The other point, there are 2-3 significant points. The news that I've been following tell me that the conversations from Iran are this. They say that in the 12-day war, they had an advantage. It was the diseased Ayatollah who was too cautious and who sought a ceasefire. So the current IRGC and the other lot, even the new Ayatollah, Mushtaba, the younger lot are of the view that they must not do a ceasefire very easily. They are more hardline than the previous Ayatollah. And it does seem to me, as things are panning out, that there not only has the response been far tougher, but even in the negotiations, they'll strike a more offensive chord. And the last point that I want to make is this. You see the terms that the Israelis set for a ceasefire, nuclear and missile. So nuclear is very reasonable. But when you say not even missiles, which country will agree to this? Because it is the only thing they have in the arsenal. So there are, in negotiations, there are limits to, what you ask. If you ask them to shed their missile arsenal, are the talks going to go anywhere? I have my great doubts. And the last point I would like to make is this. I mean, I was wondering, was this the first global energy war? And could we just be averting it? If my history is not wrong, I think the last time there was a war about choke points was in 1516s. The food grains flow from Russia to Europe over the Strait of Hormuz, and that ended in a stalemate. The choke point could not be vacated. Here, I think we are nearing a similar conclusion, and therefore, if Taiwan, is gets into a blockade over the third choke point, semiconductors, look at the task before the Americans. Will they be able to break that blockade? Because history, the current conflict, and the next conflict tell us that it is darn difficult. So I mean, and so this is, I think, the lessons coming out from the current conflict. If you look at history and peep into the future.
Okay, I want to just play out a more detailed comment from Trump. We had a very short clip that we played earlier. It's so confusing what is actually happening. And when he was asked, who are you talking to? He said, a very important person. It's only the media that's reporting the role of these countries. He said, if I name the person, that person will be killed. He's continuing to insist that there is going to be a change in regime. He's continuing to say that. He's continuing to say America wants the enriched uranium and so on. And he's, of course, using kind of problematic language in saying bombing our little hearts out. Let's take a look at a more detailed statement from Trump.
Iran's foreign ministry says you're not telling the truth when it comes to productive conversations to end the war.
Well, they're going to have to get themselves better public relations people. We have had very, very strong talks. We'll see where they lead. We have major points of agreement. I would say almost all points of agreement. Perhaps that hasn't been conveyed. The communication, as you know, has been blown to pieces. They're unable to talk to each other. But we've had very strong talks. Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner had them. They went, I would say, perfectly. I would say that if they carry through with that, it'll end that problem, that conflict, and I think it'll end it very, very substantially. We have very much in mind our partners in the Middle East. We've had great relationships with a lot of them, as you know. A lot of them were surprisingly hit, and I was surprised to see it, and so was everyone else. But we have they're very much in mind in the discussions. So the discussions took place yesterday. They went into yesterday evening. They want very much to make a deal. We'd like to make a deal too. We're going to get together today by probably phone because it's very hard to find a country. It's very hard for them to get out, I guess. But we'll at some point very, very soon meet. We're doing a 5-day period. We'll see how that goes. And if it goes well, we're going to end up with settling this. Otherwise, we'll just keep bombing our little hearts out.
Okay, so what do we make of this? Do we make anything of it? Harriet, I'll start with you. You're saying 50-50. Got to see how this develops. Do you think, with all your experience in security, that there are contours of some off-ramp taking place, and would that necessarily involve a different Iranian leadership?
Right. So I think that's a very interesting statement on the part of the president. First of all, I do think if you listen to this statement that you just played, that there are some very specific points in it. And I don't think that Donald Trump would have expressed those if there was nothing going on. And again, he said it in a very convoluted way, but there is credence to the point that there is a tremendous level of confusion and destruction within the Iranian regime at the moment, and a lot of influx. So it could possibly be that there's a very large section that is saying, what negotiations? And there is a section that is saying, yes, we're talking, or not saying it, but talking. And it could be when he says, oh, this, if I say who it is, it could be killed. I don't know who, also some of your guests were talking about the voices that they're hearing saying, oh, we're radicalized and we'll never give up and so on and so forth. Yes, of course, there's always that. And they were very strong under Ayatollah Khamenei. But there is no, as far as we know, Mujtaba Khamenei in an operative way at the moment. So I'm not I don't know what his state is, but it doesn't seem to be of any weight or significance now because of possibly the states that he is. So could be that he's talking about President Pezeshkian, could be Abbas Araghchi. I don't know, and I would not speculate. But this thing about regime change is very conspicuous. I think he will probably, if anything comes of this, they would probably put somebody in charge, such as Abbas Araghchi or Pezeshkian, that have a different perspective, but by no way are really representative of a regime change, but they would call it a regime change, right? It would really be possibly a leadership change, but it would be marketed as regime change. When we think of regime change, we think of the end of the IRGC. I don't think, or the end of the Ayatollah regime. So you could say, okay, there are no more Ayatollahs. Now, whoever, Kalibaf is in charge or Pezeshkian is in charge, that would still be the IRGC. So I don't see, that being a very realistic situation in the immediate future. But as I said before, and I keep saying, I do think this regime has ended its time if we're talking about 3, 4, 5 years from now, because I do not believe that the atrocity committed in January will be something that they will be able to step over. I have more belief in what President Trump is saying than I think some of your guests. But of course, I'm not saying this is what's happening. But the way he's stating things, the specifics that he's giving, and some of the additional reports we're hearing here in Israel lead me to believe that something could very possibly be going on. And we'll see if Islamabad takes place or not.
I think you've picked up a very interesting point. Could there be two opinions in Iran? And I want to take that to Ambassador Yash and General Shukla. Press TV is, of course, denying it flatly. It's saying in recent days, the United States has insisted on using some neighboring countries as intermediaries, but Iran has not responded. Iran has not responded to this request of negotiations, and no talks have taken place with the US. But I think Helen Parrell makes an interesting point. Could there be two views, and who's in charge in Iran? She's acknowledging that it's not going to be the end of the IRGC. It could be leadership, a new leadership packaged as regime change. Ambassador Sinha, is that something you think you agree with, or you think we're getting ahead of ourselves? We don't even know what is true and what's not at this point.
Well, exactly. I think we are getting ahead of ourselves, and I think in my assessment, the IRGC is very much in control. The very fact that Mujtaba, if you read some of the sort of reports on how Mujtaba was selected, it's quite clear that the IRGC are the one that calls the shots. And even though President Trump claims that the Iranian Navy has been decimated, the fact is that the IRGC is able to hold the whole world to ransom by choking the Strait of Hormuz. So I think the IRGC is very much in charge. Now, the IRGC may make an estimation that there has been so much devastation caused in Iran that it may be better to seek a pause, or at least to try and seek cessation of hostilities. And they may put up someone like Araghchi or the speaker or the president to speak, but they would be controlling the narrative as far as Iran is concerned. I think this is the assessment that I have made, but I think everybody wants peace, and I'm sure the IRGC at some point realizes that they can't continue like this. They're extremely unpopular, and I agree with Herod that this regime may not be toppled today or tomorrow, but I would say the days or weeks or months are numbered, because frankly, when this war is over, and when sort of people sort of pick up their lives and see what's happened, particularly in Iran, I think that simmering discontent will boil over again. So I think they're aware of what the sort of imponderables are, and it's always better to sue for peace and claim victory. And if they can get an off-ramp where each side claims victory, then I think we have, if not a solution, because I'm sure the countries that you're in and in the GCC countries won't be particularly happy if the work is left half done. But be that as it, the rest of the world will heave a sigh of relief.
Right, absolutely. The Gulf will be very worried about some of these developments. General Shukla, just briefly, your thoughts. I want to play out a little clip from Tehran and then take last comments from all of you. But your thoughts on Trump?
See, the point is this, that whom is Mr. Trump talking to? If he doesn't want to name that gentleman, let's call him Mr. X. Now, if that Mr. X is speaking on behalf of the IRGC, is the regime playing Mr. Trump? If it is from a separate faction, at some point they have to come out. And are these denials, the official denials that we are getting, do they point to the fact that there is one faction talking to Trump and the other faction is denying it? Is there a split? Because at some point, these gentlemen whom he's talking to, X and Y, have to travel to Islamabad or wherever. So, I mean, these are all, complications. But at this point, my assessment is similar to Ambassador Yash Sinha, that nobody can be talking to Mr. Trump without the sanction of the current people in power, Mushtaba or whoever it is.
Yeah.
Because that would be kind of indicating that Trump has found a Delcy Rodriguez. I don't think there is any Delcy Rodriguez in Iran at this point. So that would be my assessment.
Before we take very brief last comments, just it's been very difficult to hook up to Iran because of the connectivity there. I did manage to speak with one voice, Dr. Sitara Siddiqui, very strident about no peace deal. And just to give you a sense of how some voices are reacting in Iran, take a look at this.
Well, Iranians have made it clear that there has not been any talks, indirect or direct, as you also mentioned, between the United States and Iran. And Iran has had an experience of engaging in negotiations or indirect talks with the United States over its nuclear program 2 times, once in June and then in February, and being bombed during the talks. We were on the eve of the 6th round of the indirect talks in June, and this time on the 3rd, or just a few hours or a couple of days before the 3rd round of indirect talks over our nuclear issue, when we were bombed. And Iran has made it clear that this was the last chance we gave to diplomacy, and it's over. And for any talks regarding a cessation of fire exchange, we will demand certain things to be fulfilled by the United States and Israel, including, for example, the closure of U.S. bases in the region, guarantee that there will be no aggression coming from Israel, and also full control over the Strait of Hormuz. What it seems like by now is that Trump is trying to control oil prices, because after this statement, we saw a drop in oil prices, and this is his way of manipulating the market until he can buy himself times in order to figure out a way out of this war. He has been desperately looking for a ramp off, and Iran has made it clear that, and Iran had warned in advance that once you start this war, this is going to be very different from the 12-day war in June. It's going to turn out into a regional war, and we're seeing Iran doing exactly what it had promised that it will do. And I think there, on the internet, there is TACL, which stands for Trump always chickens out. So we're seeing signs of him chickening out and being frustrated by losing control over the Strait of Hormuz, losing control over this war. And basically, this is not what he was expecting. He thought he could finish the Iranian establishment in a few days and just, withdraw from the war. But this is very different from what he has said. And let's not forget that he's a mental case. He has been, changing his rhetoric all the time when they.
All right. So that made me smile a little bit in the midst of war, because the Iranians are now using phrases like TACO. They're calling Trump a mental case. It gives you a sense of, a kind of emboldenment. I don't know what other word I should use. Quick last comments on any thoughts on that voice from Tehran, but also any best estimations of what happens next. I'll start with you, Helen, very quickly.
To hear from somebody who's speaking for one of the most radical, murderous regimes to hear calling Donald Trump a mental case. They have plenty of mental cases themselves, and I wouldn't start that argument because I'm not sure they would win it. I also want to put something into perspective. Iran, after these weeks of war, is not exactly in a great position. We keep talking about the position that Donald Trump has cornered himself into. And understandably, there are forces working to bring him to want to resolve this. And he has actually said that from the beginning. I'm not a proponent of this strategy of his or whatever, but I'm saying, this has been put forth. Iran has taken terrible, terrible hits. We're not to say Trump always chickens out when you look at the level of forces the United States has brought to bear in Iran. I'm not sure people know what's going on in Iran right now. I don't know they understand the level of destruction, especially because despite some very, very terrible mistakes, Iran has been hit by Israel and the United States mostly in military facilities and facilities that serve the IRGC and the regime, and has tried very hard not to impact civilians, which Iran, of course, never does. It always impacts civilians because they want to support the Iranian people. So when Trump says help is on the way, it took him quite a while, but he showed up. And I'm sitting in Tel Aviv being bombed, and I can tell you, I'm not changing places with anybody in Iran right now. So let's just put that into perspective. And the other point I want to say is, like, when we keep saying here, I think when we're saying here, Iranians are saying this, who? If Mujtaba is in any kind of position of power, take a video camera to a clandestine situation, film him saying anything. Don't put out statements in his name. Don't go about saying, yes, no, he's here, he's there. Who is the address in Iran who's putting out these statements, and who do they speak to? And that's not to say that I'm convinced that Donald Trump is speaking to someone who can deliver Iran. I'm just not particularly impressed with the opposite voices as well. It's a lot of influx. It's very hard to tell.
I think that's an absolutely fair perspective in terms of where is Mujtaba Khamenei. The videos and the pictures of his are all undated. We have no idea when they were filmed, how badly injured he is, who's actually in control. And also, I don't think any of us here are fans of the Islamic regime, particularly its record on women. That's something I got into with the person I was interviewing, but I just played a little clip there, Helet. So just so you know. General Shukla, very briefly, I'm afraid we have very little time left. So your last thoughts, General Shukla?
2 quick points. I mean, if it is true that Mujtaba is not even alive, that is exactly the point. If the Iranians have been hit so badly, they are leaderless, and they have still not chickened out. It is this resilience that is causing problems for Trump. And Trump now, is he genuinely turning peacemaker, or is he looking for an off-ramp because he has no solutions beyond? That is the other critical point. Because if he were winning, would he be looking for these off-ramps? So I think it's a stalemate. The Americans won in the first 3 phases. What took them completely by surprise was Hormuz. And it is, that stalemate, I think, that has caused Trump to retrace his steps.
Ambassador Yashin, a quick closing word to you.
I think the US and Israel have underestimated Iran. Iran is a civilizational state. I keep repeating it. I know that the current regime is brutal, and I completely agree with Heret about the nature of the regime. However, I think the end result that was being expected in Washington or in Tel Aviv hasn't happened. And that is why we are looking at various off-ramp solutions. That's the first point. The second point, Israel is a very good friend of India, and I would dare say a close partner of India's. And so was the US. And I use the word was because what this administration has done in the last 1 year has, I would say destroyed, but certainly they've lost the trust of the Indian people. So I think with these 2 factors in mind, we've got to understand how we feel in India about this war and how it's going to end.
I think that's absolutely well said. There's so many trust issues with Trump and his government in the United States of America. So many flip flops, so much almost sort of talking down, and all kinds of ramifications flowing from that. Thanking all three of you for an absolutely stellar conversation. Ambassador Yash Sinha, General Shukla, Helen Parrell joining us from Israel today, and we hope to reconnect with you in the next few days. We're continuing our coverage here. For any of you who missed it, let me remind you that Trump is not just claiming that there are very good talks going on with Iran. He's giving it 5 days and then saying if it doesn't work, we'll bomb our little hearts out. A lot of people are saying, is this serious? Is this not serious? Is this only to bring the price of oil down? Take a look before we introduce our next guest.
To get together today by probably phone, because it's very hard to find a country. It's very hard for them to get out, I guess. But we'll at some point very, very soon meet. We're doing a 5-day period. We'll see how that goes. And if it goes well, we're going to end up with settling this. Otherwise, we'll just keep bombing our little hearts out.
Who is Steve Witkoff speaking with?
Well, there you have it. I had to bring back veteran diplomat Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee because I think 2 days ago or less than that, Ambassador Mukherjee and Prasad were both on our program, and Ambassador Mukherjee opened like this, and I'll just repeat it for anybody who doesn't remember. I'm going to stick my neck out and say this war is ending. And everybody went, huh? Because the rest of us were all like, this war is ratcheting up. And she said, by first week of April, it'll be over. Donald Trump seems to have been listening to Ambassador Mukherjee. I was at UAE's oldest mosque today. It's called the Al-Bidya Mosque in Fujairah, Ambassador, getting soaked in the rain, talking about the precipice on which both countries were standing, dangerous escalation coming. And suddenly came Trump's announcement, and I had to redo my whole report, which I'll play towards the end of the program. But I want to ask you, should we be saying, congratulations, ma'am, you were right as always, or would you hesitate and wait and see whether your own forecast is coming true, given that we have no official response from the Iranian government, and we have the Iranian media saying it's all bunkum? Ambassador Mukherjee.
Well, thank you, Barkha. I broke my own rule to join your show today because normally I don't take shows after 9 p.m. But yes, I was told that you have to be there because what you said, you have to confirm whether you meant it or you did not. I said what I did because I was convinced that the rising price of oil in United States and in its allies would hit Trump hard, because if he loses the midterms, he will definitely be impeached, and he can't afford to get impeached, right? So that's why I said what I said. Further, I was convinced that despite the bravado being shown by the Revolutionary Guards of Iran, etc., they were getting thrashed, bashed, etc. And sustaining the continued closure of the Straits of Hormuz was not tenable, because invariably the neighboring states who have kept quiet so far could possibly join in, and others who are badly affected. It won't be India, but there will be other countries. Therefore, Iran, as Yash said, a long civilizational state like India, also understands the reality. It doesn't really matter whether the person in charge is dead, in a coma, or is being propped up by artificial intelligence. Somebody there has taken the decision to hit back. That was a big mistake, because Trump obviously expects that those who are inferior to him in conventional and nuclear assets can be thrashed like in the old days, good old imperial times, colonial times, Barkha. He would have been an amazing colonialist if he had been born at that time. So, yes, I think that what he is saying is correct. I think that this is going to wind down because it's beginning to impact the Western global interests big time, and his allies. And also, perhaps his aides have told him that he has been dragged into a war which his predecessors avoided, which Israel always wanted, the Americans to be dragged into a war for the total elimination of this regime. And it was only Trump who was foolish enough not to understand the danger signals and to get dragged in. But he's also a smart guy. After all, he's a businessman. When he knows the going is getting rough, he knows how to get out. And I would therefore say, Barkha, that I think it is winding down. And I can tell you one thing, if it is winding down, as a representative of 1.4 billion Indians here along with you, I am extremely relieved because things were beginning to get rather hot and rather rough here. If you had heard our Prime Minister's speech today in Parliament, it was
Absolutely.
very reassuring. But he is a person who speaks little, but he spoke to reassure the corporate sector in India, the middle class Indians in India, but more than anyone else, those who support him to the end, that is, the poor people, the labor, the migrants, all of them needed those reassuring words, and that came from him. So I think it is time to to bring this war to an end. But if you think, Barkha, I'm going to thank Trump for it, forget it. I'm not going to do that.
I'm only going to thank one person, and that's you. But I have a couple of questions before I do that. I'm glad you mentioned the Prime Minister's speech. I was going to bring that up. Prime Minister Modi's address to Parliament, asking for the country to remain united, like we had in COVID. The speech was before Trump's announcement. He also spoke about working on India's energy reserves. He acknowledged the gravity of the situation. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Ambassador. I do want to. Bring your attention to a couple of things before I come to Prasad. One is this picture we have, Dr. Jaishankar meeting envoys of Gulf countries in Delhi amid the West Asia war, important. But Axios News in America is reporting that the three countries who have played a role in this mediation are Egypt, Pakistan, and Turkey. And they're also claiming that Pakistan might be the country that hosts a delegation of Americans and Iranians. Iran, in the meantime, we have statements coming in. The Iranian Foreign Ministry has told Al Jazeera that there are no talks. You now have this statement on your screen. Where we have Ghalibaf saying that Iranian people demand complete and remorseful punishment of the aggressors. And it goes on to say no negotiations have been held with the US, and this is fake news. It's being used to manipulate the financial and oil markets. So these are now official entities in Iran beginning to speak up, while American media is saying this same gentleman who's writing this is the one who will be leading Iran's delegation to Islamabad. So your quick response on Pakistan's alleged involvement, if true, and this denial that we're seeing coming from Iran from the same man that American media is saying is going to be leading the talks.
I think, Barkha, that it cannot be true because the Pakistanis are supposed to be in a defense pact with Saudi Arabia. In which case, if the Saudis would ask them hypothetically to defend them against Iranian attacks, the Pakistanis would be obliged to send in the Pakistani army, air force, etc., which would not be possible, Barkha, for a very simple reason. They had turned down earlier offers because the Pakistani armed forces consist of both Shias and Sunnis. They are not divided on Shia-Sunni lines. It's very important to remember this. And that is why earlier, when the Saudis had asked them for help, they had to refuse. So I don't see any meeting in Islamabad. I think the meeting, if it would happen in Oman, or it would happen where you are sitting there and I wish you would come home. Bakka, it would happen in Dubai. Don't come home before that happens, but come home after that. I don't think it would happen in Islamabad. It would happen either in Oman or in Dubai. And I think the rumors that J.D. Vance would represent the American side is correct. He would be there because he, being what he is, and with his Indian origin wife and all the rest of it, whatever people say, he is regarded as far more acceptable than any of the others in the Trump administration. So I think he would be there. And I
Okay.
think would be a good boost for Vance also to be in that position.
So it's very interesting if JD Vance does lead the talks, if the talks do happen. JD Vance has been against this war, that is well documented. So if he leads the talks, that'll be interested. Also, Ambassador Mukherjee saying if these talks do happen in a face-to-face way, she believes that these talks will happen where I am in the UAE or perhaps Oman. Oman was mediating the last time around also and has some inside track experience with this. Prasad, for those who say this has been done to manipulate the markets, bring the prices of oil down, I know you've been looking at the markets, you've been looking at Dow futures. How are you looking at this as an entrepreneur? I can't hear Prasad. Could we unmute him? Prasad? You're muted at your end, Prasad. Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Firstly, I have to say that at 5:26 p.m. today, I responded to Ambassador's tweet saying, what did I say? I said, Ambassador, you won, I lost, and I'm so happy. This was at 5:26 p.m. And yes, she was right. This guy, he announced all of a sudden pre-market opening, and then suddenly you saw 15% oil prices go down. The Brent as well as WTI both crept below 100. The markets went up. The Dow futures were up, and the Dow Jones now, when the actual market opened, is even higher than what the futures indicated. So it's actually, it almost seemed like the news was timed to help the markets recover. What is important for all of our viewers to know is one of the worst things that has happened is the last resort for investors and safe haven, which is gold and silver, lost $1,000 an ounce the entire last week. In 1 week, they lost 20% of their price. It was over 5,000 last Monday, and it's at 4,000 today. So I think the commodity markets, the oil, that's the energy markets, the stock markets around the world, everyone was bleeding. And I think if there's anything that Trump understands very well, he doesn't like losing money. And so I think this was timed to basically do that. One important thing about the Iranians, you're hearing multiple voices from Iran denying these talks completely. And what is interesting is that all of them are saying there are no talks, there were no talks, there will be no talks. But Trump is insisting that there have been some talks with somebody. It could also be a signal of internal fractures inside of Iran, where there are some groups in Iran that are opposed to this, whereas there are the other moderate groups in Iran that want a ceasefire and kind of save themselves from, with the destruction that they've already been through and just limit it at this point. That's one. In addition to all of this, I think the missile strikes of Iran last week on Dimona, that surprised everybody, including Israel. Very rarely do you hear the Israeli prime minister coming on the news channels to talk about the destruction and tweet expressing condolences and talking about the damage that those two cities, Aral and Dimona, have sustained so many losses. So it's very rare, and I think a lot of these things played out last week, and I think it was decided that we should try and tone down the rhetoric.
So I know we have Ambassador Mukherjee's time for only a few more minutes, so I'm going to get straight to it, Ambassador Mukherjee. I take two quick comments from both of you, and then let you enjoy the rest of your evening. Ambassador Mukherjee, here's my question: are you questioning a little bit of your own theory because of the way Iran is reacting, or do you agree with Prasad that there might be two camps in Iran? Question one. And question two, what do you think is going to happen in this 5-day breather that Trump has created for himself? And to the cynics who say, and let me tell you, some cynics say this is for oil. I interviewed a professor in Tehran, and I just played out that clip a little while earlier, and she's making fun of Trump. She is in Tehran and she's saying, oh, you've heard the word taco? This is taco. Trump is chickening out. The Iranians who are followers of this particular government are making fun of Trump. So it's not just Trump making fun of them. They're also making fun of Trump. Iran hasn't backed down at all after so many days of war. I'm just wondering what you make of their denials, Ambassador Mukherjee.
Well, Barkha, when you are in a difficult situation, like for instance, you would probably not have been born when the Chinese invaded us in 1962. I still remember I was a small kid then, and we were getting thrashed, but there was only All India radio, and every evening at 9 o'clock there would be a program to make fun of the Chinese dragon, etc., etc. So when a country is getting thrashed, it is a civilizational country, whether it's India or it's Iran or it's China or it's Egypt. People don't back down by brute use of force. So naturally, there will be people who will continue to make fun of Trump. And is that unusual? Because every day I get 1,000 memes of people making fun of Trump from inside the US, from Latin America, from Africa, from...
I'm just saying there's no fear. There's no palpable fear in Iran.
I heard her. I admired her statement, but I don't agree with it. I think that she will not accept, because she doesn't want to do it publicly, that Iran has got thrashed. It was not taco. He did not back off. What he did was even more foolish. He got inveigled by the Israelis to get involved. He did not back off because the Israelis inveigled him to get involved. Now he wants to back off because he's understood that this is going to destroy the Western global economy. For that reason, I'm saying that I'm sure there is a lot of dissent within Iran on this matter, but I do believe that they will accept, because if they don't, I don't agree with Trump that he's going to bomb every little heart. That's the way he talks, this Trump. But they will get further thrashed, and we need to open up the Straits of Hormuz. But what people need to also understand is that the damage that has been done, for instance, to Qatari oil, gas installations, etc., will take time. So in any case, for India, for instance, we still need to look at alternative supply chains. We have to. But it's great news, and it is going to have a very positive effect on the market. And yes, I'll stick my neck out again, Barkha, since you always encourage me to do that, and say there will be no meeting in Islamabad. It will either be where you are, and you will cover it live for us,
yes,
or it will be in Oman, or it will be in a third destination. I can't right now think of anyone else, but it's not going to be in Islamabad. And I don't think the field marshal, whose photo you are showing me, and I cannot stand this guy, the field marshal will have anything to do with it. Please do remove him from your screen.
Let's remove him. Remove him. But it's news. We have to react to news. Oops, they removed everybody while removing Asim Munir. We still have to react to the news, Ambassador Mukherjee, whether we like it or not. Sometimes the news is not to our liking, but it's the news. The Financial Times is reporting that Pakistan is involved. I'll take your last comment on that after I take Prasad on whether this is a taco moment or not. What Ambassador Mukherjee is saying is actually speaking to the heart of the American debate right now. MAGA is split on the Israel question. Tucker Carlson is losing it every day. Joe Kent is losing it. Megyn Kelly is losing it. Joe Rogan is losing it. And there are people who are now beginning to feel that Trump is being controlled by Israel, by the Israel lobby. How do you see it, Prasad?
And to continue that sentence of yours, Trump is losing it on Joe Kent, he's losing it on Tucker Carlson, he's losing it. So it's like everybody in the US is losing it on each other, and they're all from the same Republican Party. That's what it is. But if you look at it, this was purely a decision of economics, because I'm just getting messages as we speak. Israel is bombing Tehran as we speak. Iran, there's a massive sound of interception. My uncle from Bahrain has just sent me this message that there's a massive sound of interception of a drone overhead above their house right now in Bahrain. And then I've also read 45 minutes back, there was an attack on a Kuwaiti refinery again. So the war has not wound down. It is just that the Americans have stopped participating, and so the American markets have calmed down because it's one less bad actor in this whole mess. And I think it's the one thing that has to be stated is, silently through back channels, all the GCC countries over the weekend have sent a message to Trump saying, this war cannot continue. Each and every GCC economy is being destroyed completely. We cannot take this anymore. This has to come to an end. And for that, whatever needs to be done, please go ahead and do it. But this war has to end. This cannot continue like this. So there's a lot of pressure. Economics is finally playing a big role. There's a lot of pressure from all the sides. And I think that's why this has happened. But my definition of the war being over, I have my own control gates. Number one, there shouldn't be any more bombing of each other in this region. And number two, the Strait of Hormuz has to be opened and ships have to pass through freely. When I mean freely, means without obstruction. Now, in the process, if Iran wants to start charging a fee like Egypt charges through to the Suez Canal today, if that's going to be a new normal, then so be it. It's okay. But at least supply chain has to be restored and goods have to be available, whatever be the price.
Yeah. Ambassador Mukerji, I'm going to give you the closing word. One on a topic you don't like, which is Asim Munir, and the other on the fact that bombings are continuing, and it is true. We've been following them as well. I don't think we're going to see, this is not an end to the war right now. Even by your own timelines, you were looking at the first week of April. But I think you believe, despite all the denials coming from Iran, that a de-escalation process has begun. Question one, why do you think Iran is denying it, including the speaker of Iran, who, according to American media, is supposed to lead the talks? Question one. And question two, and this will be the closing comment to you. You don't like Asim Munir. I don't like Asim Munir. No Indian likes the Pakistan Army chief, particularly this one. However, this role that is being reported for Pakistan in this imbroglio, does that concern our interests?
Well, to answer your first question, Barkha, I do believe that it is winding down. When a war winds down, a war which has been primarily pushed by one partner who's very close to us, Israel, and reluctantly accepted by the second partner, the president of the most powerful country in the world, who has finally realized that civilizational countries that have brought down empires cannot be conquered in this manner. Naturally, there will be some dissenting opinions, etc., but it will wind down. And what I said, 3rd or 4th of April, Barkha, I still stick my neck out on that. As far as Asim Munir is concerned, this is a creature propped up by Trump. This is a person who has shown rare earths of Baluchistan not accessible to Pakistanis on a small little tray, like offering champagne to the American president. This man has no role to play. And I am 100% sure there will be nothing in Islamabad. This is all propped up. This is all nonsense. It's like their former ambassador, who I knew very well, the High Commissioner, saying that if America attacks us for ballistic, we are going to nuke India. Excuse me. Are you crazy? You're talking about this because you missed out on being Foreign Secretary of Pakistan 3 times running. I know him very well. He, by the way, I've known him for 25 years, Barkha. So what I'm trying to say is This is all wishful thinking. If there is a negotiation, it will take place either in Dubai or in Oman or in a third venue acceptable to both sides. For instance, Geneva, as an example. It will be negotiated with those who matter in Iran and by JD1. And finally, I would say that it will be done quickly because already we've seen how the global markets have picked up. That is what Trump and US needs. And frankly, Barkha, that's also what we need. And that's also what the Gulf states need. And therefore, as my co-panelist said, and I'm happy for once to completely agree with everything he said because he disagreed with everything I said in your last talk. But I'm so glad that he's democratic enough to accept that sometimes an Indian woman can be more correct than an Indian male. That's really good. It shows we women are actually moving forward. So what I'm saying is that I think this is going to stay, Barkha. This is not going anywhere. They need to open up, and I was actually going to say, why the hell should Iran make people pay? But he said it's okay. Looking back, since he's an economist with more experience, okay, not the amount that they're asking, but we can pay a small amount. But the Straits of Hormuz have to open, and then we have to focus completely on repair of these vital gas and oil installations and get things back to normal. And then pray for the midterms, Barkha, so that Trump can get impeached. I'm sticking my neck out on that also. And by the way, I don't need an American visa and I don't need to visit the United States. So I'm very safe where I am in Delhi. Thank you much.
Well, thank you so much. May you be right on all counts. I think no Indian is going to have a tearful moment if Trump gets impeached. We'll all be glad to see the back of him. And may you be very, very right about this war. The world needs it to end. I will say thank you to Prasad and for taking it on the chin about being wrong, and to Ambassador Mukherjee, who always sticks her neck out. I will leave all of you today with a very interesting moment I had here. As I told you, I went to look at to Fujairah. Fujairah is an emirate being developed, by the way, by the UAE as an alternative to Hormuz. It's the only emirate from where you can actually export oil without going through Hormuz. And that's why it was targeted by Iran. And while I was there, I stumbled upon UAE's oldest mosque that goes back to 1599. And after I had filed one report that was totally outdated by Trump's announcement, I filed a second one in which I said perhaps the world's prayers for peace have been heard by some force above. So whichever force you believe in, this is a war that the world needs to end. I leave you tonight with my report from the Al-Bidya Mosque, UAE's oldest mosque. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Prasad. And thank you to our audience for watching.
On this rain-drenched Monday afternoon in the United Arab Emirates, here in the Emirate of Fujairah, I am standing outside the country's oldest existing mosque. Let me show it to you as the camera moves behind me to show you this beautiful, beautiful mosque that dates back to 1599. In fact, it is still a functional mosque. Prayers are still held here. It's a small mosque, so it can take about 70 worshippers at a time. Now, why am I showing you a mosque in the middle of a war? Well, it seems as if the prayers for peace have been answered somewhat. Donald Trump has announced on his Truth Social post that for 5 days he has instructed the Department of War in America to halt any attacks on power and energy sites in Iran. That's right. This is the first moment that we have seen of the possibility of talks between Iran and America, something confirmed by the American president himself. So it seemed appropriate today to show our viewers not just this beautiful heritage site, but also to talk about the hope of prayer, of reason, of logic prevailing. I'm not saying it's all over, it's all done. This is a lull. This is a 5-day window. but maybe it is a 5-day window that might lead to some sort of permanent or at least intermediate off-ramp and will bring back all parties from the brink. Let's also talk a little bit about where we are. This is the Emirate of Fujairah. The Al-Bidya Mosque is in the Emirate of Fujairah. And Fujairah was, of course, being developed as an alternative to the Strait of Hormuz. And the Strait of Hormuz is something we've seen with the closure of the strait, how it impacts energy supplies. The UAE was working on developing the port city of Fujairah as one that could be an alternative to Hormuz. And through the war, when Iran declared it to be a legitimate target, we saw a drone interception over the port city. We saw that interception leading to a fire on the ground. We all saw the giant billowing smoke that still dots till today the Fujairah skyline. I drove through it, but the rules here prevent me from actually showing you those pictures, but I've seen them with my own eyes. So Fujairah was exporting 1.7 million barrels of oil on average every day in 2025 before the war started. Fujairah will be critical to the energy debate. Remember, before Trump's announcement, large parts of Tehran were reporting power outages, and there was fear that America may have been already begun targeting power installations in Iran even before the deadline that Trump had set ended. And Iran had released a long list of energy and infrastructure sites in the Gulf, including in the UAE, with a warning that the Gulf would go dark if power supply in Iran was attacked. So we were really at a crisis point. We were really at a very serious escalation point. But for now, Trump has announced that there will be a 5-day window when Iran and the United States of America will try and reach some resolution. So somebody's prayers have worked. Perhaps the prayers here offered by the people of the UAE and across the world reeling from the cataclysmic impact of this war. The oldest mosque in the UAE behind me, the Al-Bidya Mosque. Signing off with Anup Kumar, Barkha Dutt in the Emirate of Fujairah for Mojo Story. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.